Welcome to the Mission First People Always podcast. We're glad you're here. And now our host, Dr. Mike Patterson.
On this episode of the podcast, we have an industry veteran and thought leader who is going to tell us not only why customer service is critical, but how to build a high-performing customer success team and develop leaders from within those teams. So whether you're interested in the customer success function or you're not even sure what customer success means, there will be value for you in this episode because we're talking about leadership, developing people, and accomplishing an important mission. Jess Osborn is the Vice President of Customer Success at GoCardless, where she leads a team that is revolutionizing customer experiences worldwide. Her achievements include steering multi-million-dollar portfolios to unprecedented success, all while cultivating a culture of excellence recognized for its impact on company retention and growth. Jess has leveraged her experience and passion for human-centric leadership to become a sought-after speaker on the customer success circuit. I'm excited to have Jess on the podcast today, and I think you'll enjoy hearing from her as well.
Welcome to the Mission First People Always podcast, where we talk about better business results, stronger teams, more successful careers, and happier lives. Along the way, we hope to bust some biases, build some bridges, and have some fun. We're glad you're here. And now, our host, Dr. Mike Patterson.
Jess Osborn, welcome to the Mission First People Always podcast. I'm glad you're here.
Thank you, Dr. Mike. I'm super excited to be here.
And I just learned that you are in the great city of Austin, Texas. I think Austin it's referred to by several terms, but I'm going to go with the live music capital of the world. Is that an accurate description still?
Very accurate. Absolutely. We just had South by Southwest in March and definitely still living up to that title.
I knew I was in a cool place when I landed at the airport and there was a live band in the airport. So I thought, this is my kind of place. And I'm sure folks who make their way to Austin will agree with that. So Jess, I'm excited to have this conversation with you today because we're talking about a topic that may be unfamiliar to some of my listeners. It's somewhat new to me, and I think it's just somewhat new to the world, to the organizational world, and that's customer success. So before we jump into some specific points that I think you can make well for us regarding leadership and team building and some of your thought leadership work in the field of customer success, let's just lay a foundation and talk about what is customer success and why the heck has it become so important over the last few years.
Absolutely. So customer success is the practice of working with customers to achieve what they bought a product for in the first place. And it is a profession that's been on the rise for a little over a decade due to the rise of the subscription economy. So as businesses have started to sell not just a one-time deal, but an ongoing service that gets renewed either monthly or every year, it becomes more and more important that not only does the product get sold, but also that the value gets realized and so that customer retains. And so customer success is a profession that has really been born out of the need to drive retention.
So what does a customer success professional do on a daily basis? And I'm already seeing some links between customer success as a retention tool that might be relevant to managers who are trying to retain their employees in a world where there are lots of options and low unemployment and lots of places good people could go. So that there may be some connections there, but what makes a good customer success professional? What do they do? How do you create these teams that are effective and build people that do this work and outstanding ways?
I love all of those questions. So, what I would say a customer success manager typically does on a day to day basis, the key thing I would direct them towards doing first is getting to know their customers. So, depending on what kind of market segment they're working on, that could look different. So, if they're in the enterprise world, that probably means literally getting to know their customers, even flying out, seeing them face to face, understanding their business model, understanding how they are trying to accomplish their goals, what goals are important to them that tie to what the CSM's company does, and how best to add value and to demonstrate that value, be able to measure that value. So that's in the enterprise segment, but increasingly, customer success aims to scale to drive profitability for businesses. And so oftentimes, customer success can also be very digital. And especially in the world where AI is growing and growing and growing, it's increasingly digital. So that can also look like monitoring the data of how your customers are adopting your product. Are they using the new features that were rolled out that should be adding value? Are they seeing the stats that show that they are seeing some value from their usage of the product? A CSM is essentially a person who knows the customer, understands what they're trying to achieve, and helps their customer base do that, whether it's one-on-one relationships or through a digital approach.
And what attracted you to get into this field? You've been in it a while. You're actually considered a thought leader in the field. Your bio suggests that you're a sought after speaker in the customer success circuit. So how did this all start for you? What was your genesis in this emerging field?
I think, like most careers, it started with a little bit of luck. Um, I was working as an intern at a search engine marketing company right when people were just figuring out how to get found on Google. And I ended up going from being an intern to a full time employee when the person who'd been training me to be an intern resigned, and she needed to have a backfill, and she put in a good word for me. So I kind of got a lucky break and started in, and at the time that company called it account management, which is a probably more well-known phrase than customer success. And I would say the main difference between an account manager and a customer success manager is an account manager looks to drive the revenue outcomes for the business they're working for, and a customer success manager aims to actually drive those outcomes of success for the customer itself, and then as a result then grows the business. But that's really how I got my break, was through that person that put her neck on the line for me and said I would be a good account manager. And I would say what I love about it is the people aspect and the problem solving. Those two things have kept me very interested in this line of work. Is I constantly get to solve different problems every day and work with people in all different facets.
So now you're a leader in this field. You're the global vice president of customer success for a large multinational organization. What do you look for? I'm sure you hire dozens of customer success managers over the course of a year or two. So you've got a lot of experience looking for good people to fill these roles. What do you look for?
I would say the number one thing to look for in team members is drive. If you have somebody who is excited about the role, is driven to learn, and I would also couple that with growth mindset. Not only the drive, but the willingness to, if you fail, try again, try a different way, that resilience. I think if you can get somebody who has that drive and that resilience, really you can teach them anything. So I have hired people with various skill sets and expertise, but I've found most consistently, if you've got somebody with drive and that resilience, then you're able to be successful.
And when did you know? Was there a pivotal moment in your career where you knew that this is my calling, this is where I'm supposed to be? I'm thriving in this environment, and I really want to be great at this. Do you remember that moment for you?
I would say when I was able to move to London to be a customer success manager in London, and then a year into that, I was able to step into a management role. I feel like when I became a manager in customer success management, that was the moment where I really felt like this is my calling. I love the customer success part of the job, but I think what I love even more than that is helping people accomplish what they want to achieve in their career. And from the time I became a manager, I was able to start working with my previously peers where I was suddenly their boss to understand what their career aspirations were, and I got to help a lot of them to accomplish those career aspirations. And in all honesty, in everything I've accomplished in my career, the amount of people and the specific people that I remember helping to get to those career aspirations, that's honestly the thing that I find most rewarding in my entire career.
So it sounds like the role of a manager, the role of a leader is really to bring out the best in others. So sometimes we use this term human centric leadership. How is that thinking influenced your leadership philosophy and your approach to leadership? And how do you communicate that to folks on your team? Do people on your team, people who join your team, immediately recognize that you're an advocate for their growth? And then how do you live that out on a daily basis?
I think it starts with communicating it. So, what I just told you about helping people get where they want to go being my passion, I communicate that to any team I take over. And I live that through by actually then following up with those individuals to help them achieve their goals. Now, one thing I have learned, I think that first place where you asked me, what was that moment in London, I think it was special on reflection because the people around me were very motivated to grow in their career. I think that was part of who we hired at that company. And so it was very easy to just point these people in the right direction. I've since found not everyone is as motivated to move beyond their current place or really, push their comfort zone. But I will say just that passion for helping people get where they want to go. I say that that's the case, and then if somebody's willing to roll up their sleeves and work with me, I will absolutely help get them there.
So is that a point of frustration? I would imagine it is a point of frustration for you when someone is content with the status quo. They're in their comfort zone. They don't want to grow, lean into learning opportunities. Um, do you kind of give up on them and you move on to somebody else? Do you continue to invest in that person? Do you try not to hire that person in the first place? How do you deal with that maybe fixed mindset, to use Carol Dweck's language, that fixed mindset person? What do you do with that?
Yeah, it's a tough one, and you're right. When I first started to come into this, I was thinking, "What on earth is going on? I'm not used to this." I think the way that you can prevent being in this situation is, to my earlier point, hiring people with drive and growth mindset from the get go, and specifically asking questions in the interview process to see if that's the case with the individuals you're speaking with. But if you have some people on your team who are more in the fixed mindset camp, I think you then have to analyze a couple things. One, not everyone is going to be a shooting star in their career. And I think I want to say it is radical candor that Kim Scott refers to the idea of a rock star, which is somebody who's more rock solid and doesn't necessarily grow as quickly, but they still are doing their job and they're doing it well and they're going to be consistent. And you do need that on teams. So if you have somebody who's a rock star, they're not looking to grow at a crazy rate, that's okay, as long as they're doing a good job and that consistency is helping the business. So those people, I just accept that that's who they are and that's the role they're going to play in the team. The problem becomes when you have somebody who is in that fixed mindset, who's underperforming and is unwilling to be self-aware of their underperformance and their role that they're playing within that. And that is where you have to get into performance improvement plan territory. And if that doesn't result in them changing their mindset and their behavior, then oftentimes that will end up in the person having to be exited from the business.
Personal growth is so important to you, and obviously it's important to me. That's, helping people grow and develop and really fulfill their potential has been my life's work for the last 30 years. How do you develop, or what has been your experience in terms of creating opportunities for growth? Maybe becomes a culture of learning and growth that you can foster and accelerate through leadership. What do you think some of the characteristics of those cultures are, and how can you pour fuel on those fires?
I think one aspect is if the business is growing, and especially if they're growing rapidly, those are environments that require people to be in a growth mindset to keep up with where the business is going. I've had situations where I've started at a business and the amount of growth that's happened during the time that I've been there has meant that some of the people who were a good fit a year ago aren't a good fit anymore because the business has just outgrown them. So I think a growing environment is definitely one that is a good catalyst for that culture of individual growth. And then I would also say cultures that are human centric, you referred to it earlier, ones that have values where they actually care about the people. I think the combination of a rapidly growing business and one that actually cares about bringing people along on the journey, those are the best places for people to really evolve their careers.
So, the mission of the organization, where the business is going, the growth trajectory of the business is also connected to the needs of people, the need for people to grow and develop, maybe indicative of the type of people who would thrive in that organization. So, there seems to be a bridge between people and performance that needs to be built and navigated on a regular basis. And all of that would seem to require a good deal of emotional intelligence. How important is emotional intelligence? I like to use the expression relationship intelligence, yeah, the ability to adjust your approach based on what you know about your people and the context you're in. How important is all of that for a leader in the world of customer success? And what have you done to develop it? What do you recommend people to do to develop it? How do you get better at building that bridge between people and performance and then helping people walk across it?
In one word, I would say it's critical. I think emotional intelligence, knowing your team, understanding the context, both of the individual and the organization. I think those are all aspects that really are basically the map towards how you help your team become a high performing team. I like to use the analogy of a gardener. A great manager is a gardener who understands that every one of their people is like a plant, and every plant needs a different mix of ingredients to grow, whether that's water, sunlight, etc. So you really need to know what it takes to motivate your people in different ways and what helps them thrive. And you need to try different things. If you notice a plant isn't growing the right way, then you got to try to figure out and just have the conversation to figure out what would make that be the case. So I would say in customer success, for me, I think at the end of the day, the more successful your individual team is in customer success and the individuals on your team, the more successful your customers are going to be. So it really is about being an exceptional leader and manager of your team so that they can then be exceptional for the customers that they're managing.
We talked about customer success largely being a product of the subscription economy, which is largely found in the tech sector and technology companies, or at least the way some of us see them, is it's a bunch of young people who work crazy long hours. It's a very relaxed environment, perhaps. We're eating pizza and we're throwing Nerf footballs around but at 3 o'clock in the morning as we're working on code. And I may have that all wrong. I very well could have that all wrong. First of all, does that reflect any environments you've been in the tech world? And two, it seems like that's a world where compassion and empathy might play a role where people may or may not feel connected to their colleagues. Maybe there's a sense of independence. Maybe I've got headphones on and I'm working, all hours of the night. Just what does that world look like? And how does empathy and compassion from a leader's perspective need to be present in that world?
That's a great question. I would say the culture of, playing the different games and what hours of the day a team is working does vary company to company, team to team. I think when I think about some of what you were just articulating, I'm picturing kind of the dev and product area of the org. And I mean, in all honesty, a lot of those engineers prefer working from home than playing games in the office. But I have been in environments where I went down to the floor where the product team was, and we were playing some silly games I'd never played before. So I think it does very much depend on the culture of the team. And it's not unusual to see, like, we used to have FIFA in the London office at Bizarre Voice, and I know a lot of people like to play that video game a lot of the time. So I do think there are things like what you described going on, but I feel like more important, at least from my perspective, for a customer team than games in the office is really just management and leadership. And I do think part of that is getting to know your team. And so from my perspective, having opportunities where the team can bond, whether those are games that are in the office, or even better, if there are activities that you can go do as a team outside of the office. I do find that work of getting to know each other on a deeper level in a different context can go a long way in terms of what that team can achieve together. So I think, there is something to like the play that you're referencing. I think it is important to have a sense of play and also just being something more than work and figuring out how you can create the opportunities for those relationships to flourish on your team.
Jess, you made a good point there, and you made me think about the likelihood of remote work and remote workers in this world. And you may be a prime example of this. You're based in Austin, Texas. Your organization is based in London, England. Your team is positioned all over, I would imagine. What unique challenges does that create for you? And then you just mentioned the importance of people feeling connected and getting to know one another and feeling like they truly are part of a team. How do you do that in a global environment, in different time zones, in different countries? What's your experience with that?
Yeah, it's a great point. It's honestly probably the biggest challenge I've been solving at GoCardless. So a good example of that is actually next week. I'll be in Chicago Wednesday through Friday with the North American team that is typically distributed all across the states. And once a quarter, we will meet up in a random city across the US, and we will spend time both doing team building activities, but also a lot of business meetings, a lot of face to face, also meals together. And in those 3 days, we are doing what our London teammates get to do on a day to day basis when they're in the office. So instead of our time together being distributed across multiple days of the year, it's condensed, it's intense. And in all honesty, I think sometimes it helps to build relationships even deeper than when you are at an office every day with somebody, because there's something about that normal day to day that doesn't foster as strong of a relationship as when it's intensive time and short bursts.
So, when you're with your team next week in Chicago, you're probably going to be talking about some current or upcoming initiatives or projects. I don't know how willing or able you are to share, but can you talk about some of those new projects, initiatives that really align with your values and your commitment to creating social good? How do you balance those professional responsibilities with things that are important to you, whether it's in the world of philanthropy or just being a good human? How does that all come together for you as a leader? How do you share that with your team? How do you build that into your team culture? Just speak to this issue that I think a lot of people think about these days.
Yeah, it's a great one. And I mean, in all honesty, I want to give credit where credit's due on this one for GoCardless. I think rather than me being responsible for driving a lot of that, I luckily picked a company, GoCardless, that has a lot of these values in place. So we're part of the Tech 100 initiative that's aimed at preventing climate change. We also have quite a few different affinity groups, everything from Pride to people of color affinity group to we also just this past week had a session on preventing burnout. And this is programming and groups of people within the company who have basically come together around a shared interest. And it offers leadership opportunities for individuals to get into one of these affinity groups and to organize events like volunteer days to go clean up a park and things like that. So, in all honesty, at this company, I am a participant in a number of those initiatives, and I've not had to be as much of a leader in it. But what I will say is, early in my career, I became a leader by leaning into initiatives like this in the businesses I was working for. And this one's not particularly philanthropic, but in terms of skills development, Toastmasters was a huge one for me early doors. I helped lead our Toastmasters group within Bizarre Voice. And I just think that we should create more space at work for these important topics, and we should allow people to come together and to lead these initiatives. And I think that's where you can basically develop the leadership skills that then get you into leadership positions later in your career.
So our time is about up, but I do want to ask two more questions. And one is to invite you to grab your crystal ball and tell us what the future of customer success looks like. Where's it going? If we've got some listeners today who have thought about pursuing a career in customer success, what they should they anticipate? Would you encourage them to jump in? Just so, what's the future of your field?
So, right now, based on where the economy is, it's become more important than ever for CSMs to have commercial acumen and aptitude. I've actually been leading a transformation to make my team the commercial owner of the existing base of our customers. So, I would say sharpening your pencils on commercial acumen is probably one of the best things I can prescribe to current day CSMs and aspiring CSMs. So if you've come into the professional world through a sales role or a sales development role, I think you would actually be well set up for moving into the customer space. And then I would say the other thing that's happening in customer success, just like the rest of the world, is the takeover of AI. And a huge amount of customer success is about trying to scale and to help drive profitability. So I think a lot of innovation and how we can make things more effective and efficient through the use of technology, whether that be AI or otherwise. I think having a skill set around how you can use AI, even in your day to day, I think can really make a difference in terms of ideas that you can bring to the table in the customer field. So I would say those are the two areas I foresee not going away in the customer field in the coming years.
Final question. And my listeners know what's coming. And it's I think maybe the most important question of our conversation. Jess, give us one piece of practical advice that the listeners can begin applying right away to improve their own leadership, to maybe develop themselves or be a better team member, team leader. Give us a piece of advice.
Develop your value proposition. I think anyone who's in business knows the concept of what a value proposition is, but I don't think many of us have taken the time to do the introspective work to identify what is your specific value proposition and how are you bringing it to life on a day-to-day basis. I think where you're able to add value, people see it, and that will help you accomplish anything you want to within your career.
Add value. And Jess Osborne, I want to thank you for adding value to my audience today. I appreciate you being a really great guest on the Mission First People Always podcast. I wish you well. And for any of my listeners who would like to connect with Jess, she encourages us to reach out to her on LinkedIn. Her LinkedIn address is right there in the show notes. So link up with Jess. If you're interested in customer success, you just want to expand your network and get into the world that she's in, that would be great. And to all of you, thank you for listening to this episode of the Mission First People Always podcast. One of the takeaways from this conversation for me is that in this, whatever organizational function we're talking about, is that leadership matters. Taking care of people matters. Bringing out the best in people matters. And your job as a leader is to do that as well as accomplish the organization's mission. People and performance always go hand in hand. And that's what I continue to preach here on the Mission First People Always podcast. If you've enjoyed this or other episodes, please subscribe or follow, leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. I am an evangelist for good leadership practices, so help me spread the good word. Until next time, do great things.
Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you want to create a strong, more people-centric and empowered culture for your organization, visit drmikepatterson.com.